Okay, so now we're going on to the next problem faced by Kennedy, which is the Berlin Wall. Not to be confused with the Berlin blockade, because they're 13 years apart and they're very different. The only thing that's the same is that they are in the same place. So the problem with the blockade was that after it was all over, Stalin obviously relented and he gave them back access to West Berlin. But what happened as a result is that two differing systems were allowed to just continue next door to each other. And so West Germany basically controlled West Berlin, but West Berlin's inside East Germany, which is a Soviet sort of satellite state, which is under the control of the Soviet Union, which is a communist state. So there's this little area called West Berlin inside East Germany, which is communist, and West Berlin is capitalist. And this was causing problems, really. And one of the biggest problems it was causing for Khrushchev and for the people in charge of the German communist government was the fact that they had this thing called brain drain going on. And this is kind of an economic term where basically all the educated people recognise that in a communist system there's not much for them, because if they're getting paid similar wages as the people without serious education, then they've wasted all their time. There's nothing in it for them. So the doctors, teachers, lawyers, engineers, people who would create jobs and push an economy forward because they've got the education to do it, they recognise they can earn a lot more money in the West and have a much nicer standard of living in the West. They start to leave, and they can leave East Germany because if they can get to Berlin, they can simply walk into West Berlin because there's no barrier or anything like that between the two halves of Berlin. And then they can just get on a train that's sealed and just travel straight into West Germany, and then they've escaped because they couldn't get out of East Germany any other way because all the borders are watched and patrolled by Soviet troops. Because that's obviously the Iron Curtain, really, and even though it's not an actual Iron Curtain, it is a barrier. So they decide, or the Soviets decide, the best way to deal with this is first of all to blame it on the fact that actually it's not about brain drain. What it's about is that spies have been sneaking into our country through this area, and we need to stop that. And they can use the evidence of the U2 crisis the year before, say, look, they were spying on Russia, they're sending spies through Berlin, we had to stop them. So on a Saturday night in August of 1961, thousands of soldiers make fences and walls all the way around West Berlin, basically on the side that's controlled by the Soviets, but stopping anyone getting out of the Soviet-controlled territory into West Berlin. The Americans can't really complain about it because it's not their territory. They're actually building it on. They're building it just over the edge into the other side, into East Germany. But it now means that people can't just walk between East and West Berlin. They can't just go wherever they want. If you were on the wrong side compared to where you lived on that Saturday night, all of a sudden you're trapped on the wrong side. And the Soviets don't care about this because what they care about is the fact that they need to stop people from leaving. It's causing a huge problem. It's estimated 3 million people left East Germany during the period since 1945. It's a huge number of people. And the economy can't survive if it's got all its educated people leaving. Now, they didn't do it earlier than this because they didn't want communism to seem like a prison, but they've kind of got no choice now because otherwise there won't be any communism if they keep letting people leave. This is the problem with communism. People won't choose to stay in it. And so what happens is Kennedy, again, is the president. He can't really do anything about it because if he tries to demolish the wall, then it's really an act of war because he's going into someone else's country. If he tries to send troops in or something like that, it's an act of war, or it could start a war. So he's made to look weak yet again. He goes to Berlin, visits, and he says, "Ich bin ein Berliner." Basically, I am a Berliner. Like, I've not forgotten you. I'm going to help you. I'm on your side, sort of thing. And the people in West Berlin cheer, but really, he's not got a lot to offer them because he can't do anything about it. And he creates these little bottlenecks, these little points of tension in Berlin, the checkpoints, where the places where you can travel. If you've got the right documents, you can travel between the two sides of Berlin. And the Soviet troops and American troops stationed at these places, the Soviets stationed troops to stop people leaving, and the Americans therefore stationed troops to protect their side from the Soviet troops. So they're within a few hundred meters of each other, and that's obviously a risk. What if they start shooting at each other? And there's little points of tension that make it likely that they might start shooting at each other. So one example is in October 1961, a US diplomat and his wife want to go to the theatre in East Berlin. They haven't got the right documentation, so the Soviets refuse to let them through. So he orders the American officer to get his men to surround his car and walk them through. And they think the Soviets won't actually attack them, but what if the Soviets had done? This could have happened, and now you've got a fighting between the Soviets and the American troops could have blown up into a much bigger war. There's times when, that has even led to tanks facing off each other, and they got on the phone and sorted it out, but they backed the tanks off like 1 or 2 meters at a time because they were just so scared that the other side would actually just start fighting, that it could have easily turned into a war. So these little bottlenecks, including particularly Checkpoint Charlie, that was the main one right in the middle of Berlin, these become kind of flashpoints for the Cold War in Berlin. Over time, it does reduce the tension because now the question of Berlin is settled. There's no more chance of like a blockade or something like that. But it does create an immediate problem, particularly for Kennedy, who looks weak yet again. That will dictate his actions later when he has to try and look strong, because he knows he can't get re-elected if everyone sees him as soft on the Soviet Union.